All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So, doing a chat with Dusty, aka Woke Centrist, who I often talk with, aka Vampiric Centrist today, because we were going to be talking about Blade, and we still will do that. But we're going to do another CRT or critical race theory chat today, because our friend Chris, who will be joining us, he saw one of Dusty and ours chat about it, and he said he didn't know what all the fuss was about. So I'm not sure whether he means he agrees with James Lindsay's perception of it more than us, or it could be that he agrees with our perception and he doesn't see what all the panic is about for James Lindsay talking about it. So for people who don't know, Dusty and I have recently been researching critical race theory and reading academic books about it. And as often happens, and as happened for me with postmodernism, I found that public intellectuals, and including people in the intellectual dark web like Jordan Peterson, get philosophy wrong always when they talk about it, like postmodernism. And then Dusty and I have been learning lately and about critical race theory, as I said, and I've also been reading about critical theory by the famous critical theorists in the Frankfurt School, like Adorno and Horkheimer, and I've been finding that James Lindsay is pretty much wrong about critical theory too, and Dusty and I know how wrong he is about critical race theory, and then basically this relates to the political issue of Trump having signed a bill into law, basically banning the teaching of critical race theory. I think it was in government jobs, and Dusty and I want to talk with Chris about that, about whether that should be a good idea or not, and also a similar related issue about whether the COVID-19 vaccine mandates, for them being a requirement, are systemically racist or not. And my answers to these questions are of whether critical race theory should be banned. And my answer to that question is no. And my answer to whether the COVID-19 vaccines are systemically racist or not is yes. But in order to understand why these are my answers, it's important to define what critical race theory is and what systemic racism is, according to what critical race theory actually is. So to start off with, do you want to say what your answers are to those questions? Whether, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to your answer to the first one, whether critical race theory should be banned and whether COVID vaccine mandates are systemically racist, and defining critical race theory and systemic racism.
Sure. No, I don't think it should be banned. It's kind of a strange thing to ban, but your second question, I actually don't know. I haven't looked into it enough to know, to have kind of an informed opinion whether it is or isn't. You might need to inform me of why you think it is. I just don't know.
I just think that they're systemically racist. In I was thinking about how I would say they're systemically racist in a similar way to how the outcomes of the drug war are systemically racist, in the way that we were talking about with that book by Michelle Alexander called The New Jim Crow. She was basically saying that the systemic laws, drug laws themselves, are not racist in the sense of having malicious intent towards Black people, but you could say that the drug laws are systemically racist because the outcomes disproportionately affect Black people. So systemic racism, in the sense of, in terms of COVID vaccines, people of racial minorities being disproportionately affected by them, like in Canada, particularly Indigenous or Native people are disproportionately affected by it because they have distrust in the medical industry due to a series of oppression against indigenous and native people, and then in America it's more so black people. So that's the sense in which I think they're systemically racist. Not that there's like malicious intent towards indigenous or black people, but that the outcomes disproportionately affect them, so that more people would be mandated to more indigenous people and black people would be mandated to get the vaccines than white people, because they have more, in general, of course, justifiable distrust of the medical industry.
Oh, yeah, I do see that. So historically, we're talking about things like the Tuskegee experiment and things like that. If you don't know what the Tuskegee experiment is, it's basically where they took a bunch of black folks, didn't tell them what they were being injected with, and they weren't being injected with syphilis, and they were allowed to go about their business, and they were just, it was a very unethical experiment in seeing what the effects of syphilis was. So at the time, I believe there was a cure for it, but they didn't administer it to these folks. And not only did that, they could have been spreading this disease around in their respective communities as well. So that hesitancy, I guess you could say, would cause a disparity amongst minorities. And not only that, I think these mandates would probably affect minorities in greater numbers. I'm just making a speculation here, but my guess is that the working class in general are going to have to come in contact with these mandates more often. Like for instance, I work at Amazon, but I don't work at any facility. I work at home. So, and I can't think of any instance where I'll ever be mandated to vaccinate myself, considering I don't work in any type of office building or have to report to any type of office building.
You don't have to be vaccinated for your security guard job either, because you're not working with other people.
Well, not unless the government has mandated it. So they haven't,
Okay.
and neither has the company that I work for. So there's no mandate there either. I wouldn't doubt though that there could be one coming down the line, but we'd have to see about that. So the mandate you're saying is racist because the mandate negatively affect black people or minorities?
Negative is debatable. I just mean systemically, specifically the word racist, in the sense that what we've been talking about in terms of critical race theory, in kind of like a sociological sense, like I said, disproportionate effects on racial minorities as an outcome of laws that are in place that themselves don't necessarily have any malicious racial intent behind them, but the unintended consequences affect them that way in like the sociological sense.
Okay, yeah, totally get it. But yeah, the mandate will definitely hurt those of the lower classes, the working classes, those who are forced to work in situations where they have to be in close proximity to others. So does it, will the mandate itself, I guess when you're talking about racist, it's like not having the freedom to choose, right? So those who
Yeah.
do have the freedom to choose whether or not to have the vaccine or not will typically be in the higher, like middle to upper class, is because, like I said, I don't have to get vaxes at any of my jobs. Um, so yeah, those mandates, and I know what a lot of schools are going to start doing this now over here. So
Okay.
right now, the mandate, I believe, is going to be based off of company size. So right now, it's just federal, if I'm not mistaken, federal employees.
Federal
And
government employees?
right now, like I haven't heard anything from my own jobs about being mandated to take a vaccine, and both of my jobs have thousands and thousands of employees under them. So doesn't look like it's gone into effect in the private sector yet. I don't know if or when that will be, but I believe in the federal sector it has, and healthcare it has for the most part. Because I think
Okay.
healthcare workers in certain cities and states are being mandated to take the vaccine, and there are some private entities too that are mandating, like airlines are mandating in some respects. Um, but comparatively, like the people who don't and quit their jobs, it's a tiny percentage. We're talking about less than 1% of a particular
Okay.
workforce is refusing to take a vaccine. But I
Okay.
believe some give you the option to test. I don't
Right.
know if that's with all. Like I know most mandates will give you either have to get the shot or you got to test weekly. I'm not entirely sure. I think the healthcare one though, I think they're not giving them the option. So
Okay.
it's not quite a blanket thing that's happening over here. I haven't heard anything about it for my job, but of course, it sounds like it affects those who are more inclined to work with people directly than those who don't, who just sit in the office like twiddling their thumbs, you know.
Okay. Yeah, I don't. Here in Alberta, it's been the case that there are, because there was a surge of the Delta wave, there are mask mandates again in businesses whenever you go to a store or anything like that. But it's up to individual businesses to determine whether they want to have like institute a vaccine passport basically. And I just read an article about how our I think it was our federal government designed an app where it has that digital scanning of the QR code for like basically a vaccine passport when you go into businesses, but it's up to the business to determine whether they require that or not. And I think the in terms of like the mask mandates and stuff like that too, I saw that the federal or sorry the provincial government here basically instituted the policy that you have to show proof of vaccination to go to certain businesses, but a lot of businesses have not been doing that. They've just been requiring you to wear a mask, which I kind of like. So Chris, I see you're here now. We were we were starting to start this off before. I was just saying that it would be good to get your opinion on because I know you said something about in terms of critical race theory, you don't know what all the fuss is about. So I I don't know whether that means that you agree with our and Dusty's perception of it, that people are fear mongering about it, or you kind of agree more with public intellectuals like James Lindsay's perception of it, that it is more of a threat. And I also wanted to get your answers for the questions, the two questions I posed in the title of this, and both Dusty and ours answers were the same, that critical race theory should not be banned, but COVID vaccine mandates are systemically racist. Not in the sense of having any racial intent, but in terms of more of the actual critical race theory definition of there being disproportionate outcomes. Like in Canada, for example, particularly Indigenous people would be disproportionately required to get the vaccine because in general, they've had like more justifiable reasons to be concerned with the medical industry because they've been oppressed by them. And then in the US, that's more so the case with Black people. So I think they're systemically racist in that sense, and that they're affecting those people more. And Dusty pointed out that they're kind of like systemically classist in that way too, because they'd also affect lower class people, but again, not with any sort of directly malicious intent, just in terms of the outcomes, because in critical race theory, the definition of racism is kind of meant in more of a sociological sense. It's not meant to necessarily imply malicious intent. So what do you think about critical race theory in general, and what are your answers to the questions of whether it should be banned as Trump did in the US, and do you think vaccine mandates are systemically racist?
Geez, that's a full plate you want me to fill there, right? I'm not gonna lie, dude. I'm really kind of ignorant when it comes to all this stuff. I mean, I know a little bit what's going on, and I've dabbled a little bit, but I haven't really gone down the rabbit hole here. And when I saw, I mean, our chat came up on Facebook Messenger, and you guys said that there was comments. So I went into the YouTube video, and at the time that I checked, there was a ton of comments, and the video it also had been, well, no offense, but ratioed at that point, and not by a lot. I think it was like 15-7 or something like that. But
yeah,
and I just
it's been really ratioed.
Yeah,
whenever we criticize the intellectual dark web lately, the videos get ratioed.
So I was coming more of a place like, what the hell is going on here? I just didn't like, I'm not gonna lie, I didn't go through your whole entire conversation. And I don't really know what James Lindsay's stance is on critical race theory either. I know him.
He really doesn't like it, and he thinks it's like a threat and it'll destroy society and shit like that.
So I was more kind of like, my message was kind of like, what is, like, I was kind of more like, what did I miss kind of going on? You know what I mean? Like, just because I didn't, so I don't know. Yeah. So I get the sense that James Lindsay comes from a place of that CRT is being taught in schools, and that, there's a lot of hoopla right now, especially in some kind of, or some school boards in the US where they're debating this back and forth, and parents are being called domestic terrorists or whatever. And, I get that there's like,
well, I've got some tidbits for you about that, but I'll get to you. I'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah, so I'm more like, you guys tell me what's going on, because I haven't really gone down the rabbit hole with CRTC. I know a little bit here and there, but James Lindsay to me is more like, he was the paper guy, or the grievance studies guy. So I know him more of that. Although I did the latest talk with him and what's that guy's
Thaddeus Russell?
Yes, thank you. I did listen to that podcast.
But Dusty and I both thought that was unbearable.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I was like, Jesus, this is like, it's almost like, okay, yeah, I understand wokeness is fucking retarded, but he's like in the opposite spectrum of that, like on the other side, which I think is equally retarded. So it's so stupid. Like, it's like, oh, the Sovietization of America. I was like, what the fuck is this
he literally said that.
Slippery slope bullshit. I was like, man, this guy's gone off the deep end, man.
Gotcha. Yeah, see, a lot of that stuff I don't know. Like, I've heard of the Frankfurt School, but I haven't gone down the rabbit hole of like what all of this been taught there. The general consensus I get from all that is that there was a bunch of scholars that went to the school and indoctrinated a bunch of teachers along the line into wokeness, and how, you can kind of bring socialism into, a lower education and then have it funnel its way through higher education, yada, yada, yada. Brings us to like Milo burning down that school, which brings us to, whatever chaos goes and how the university system has kind of been torn down since then. So,
yeah.
As far as like your original question, Andrew, of like my thoughts on CRT or critical race theory, and like where I don't know, I don't know if I have I don't know what I stand on, because I'm ignorant when it comes to this stuff. I haven't really gone down the rabbit hole. All I know of CRTZ is it was like, I believe started in the 90s by some scholars that took the idea of, I don't know. I get that in a mix of Ibram X. Kendi and, white people should be apologizing for history or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
So my knowledge is like, is an inch deep in a mile wide conversation. So that's
right.
Yeah.
So in terms of like critical theory versus critical race theory, one thing that that pisses me off about James Lindsay that I've been telling people in the comment fights is that critical theory has nothing to do with critical race theory. Critical theorists in the Frankfurt School, they were like hardcore Marxists who were really anti-capitalist and anti-enlightenment, but they never said a goddamn word about race or gender or queer studies or any of that shit. So like lumping all of these different fields of academic studies together is fucking disingenuous, since he claims to have read all of this shit. And like in terms of critical race theory being banned, Dusty convinced me that basically James Lindsay voted for Trump explicitly, he said on Twitter, apparently, for the sole purpose of banning critical race theory because he thought it's like gonna destroy society and shit like that, bro. So Dusty pointed out to me that I think we all probably agree there's nothing inherently wrong with voting for Trump, but he did it for a hypocritical reason, because he talks in cynical theories and everywhere he's on a podcast about the importance of free speech, yet he voted for Trump for the sole purpose of banning speech, which is super hypocritical. And in terms of critical race theory versus like Rubin D'Angelo and Ibram X. Kennedy and anti-racism and shit like that, I think maybe Dusty and I have a slight disagreement about that, because I don't consider that shit to be actual critical race theory, especially because like Kimberly Crenshaw, I think it might have actually been in the 80s, Kimberly Crenshaw, who James Lindsay mentions all this time, she herself said that Rubin D'Angelo in White Fragility uses her definition of critical race theory and definition of intersectionality completely incorrectly. And so the original academic critical race theorists basically like have disowned themselves from the new field of fucking woke anti-racists. And like my main problem with that is a lot of public intellectuals like James Lindsay, and especially like members of the intellectual dark web and right-wing pundits like Dave Rubin, James Lindsay, Ben Shapiro, etc., are like fear-mongering about it, clearly without having ever actually read this shit other than James Lindsay. And they're just as ignorant about it as the fucking woke wackos on the other opposite end of the spectrum who are confirming the inaccurate bullshit that the right-wing pundits are saying, because they haven't read this shit either. So it's like on one side they're saying bullshit, and the other side they're confirming the bullshit. So then the vast majority of people who have not actually studied this believe that it's just this wacko combination of a bunch of shit that actually has little to nothing to do with each other.
Yeah.
I just have, like you said, there's a little bit of disagreement. Because the weird thing about CRT is that it's not a monolith.
Yeah.
So there's like a bunch of different scholars under that banner who disagree with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So when you say CRT is this and CRT is that, you can also find dissenting opinions within CRT that say it's that dissent against that. So it's more of a body of scholarship than an actual solidified like theory. So I think CRT actually falls more under a philosophy. It's not like some scientific theory that has like 28,000 steps to go to get to the truth. There's definitely people among CRT who disagree with each other. I would consider D'Angelo just like a fringe, twisted version of CRT. But like the stuff that she says, like, oh, white people have to feel bad and all that other bullshit is not really, it's not in the, like the fundamental tenets of it. Like I was, like the reason this has become a big conversation lately is because there's like a school district nearby that have been having these town halls and school board meetings trying to ban critical race theory. And you can tell that, they're being backed by, right-wing activists. So I was trying to figure out, this is why I was trying to figure out what they were actually arguing about. So I did dive into some critical race theory books. Like, hey, there is some stuff in the books that is somewhat cringy. Like, I'm not going to lie. There's stuff in there that I would completely toss out and not even think about. Like, I think in one of the books we read,
we agree about that. Some of it is cringe for sure. Yeah,
there's some is more cringe than others. Like, I wouldn't even really consider, like, Robin DiAngelo is on the absolute fringes of CRT, and even then, like most of the stuff she says is somewhat, it's antagonistic, and contrary in a lot of ways. But
the original critical race theorists and the overwhelming majority of the field, still, as far as I understand it, it's not meant to be antagonistic. It's meant to be, like you said, philosophy, like theorizing about this shit.
Yeah, so there's also a component, because CRT, there's two things. There's the academic component, which is a body of scholarship, and then there is the movement, which is trying to act on the inequities themselves. And whatever that movement is, there's some basic guidelines in academic CRT on how to deal with issues. One of them is storytelling, which people just kind of get wrong. It just sounds like, oh, storytelling, they're just making shit up and stuff like that. It's like, no, that's not kind of what they're saying. It's like when you go to court or you argue a case in court or to a crowd of people, how you form your narrative is almost more important than the facts that are behind it. And basically, we know this because of January the 6th. Like, it was so full of bullshit, but look at how much people he got out there attacking the Capitol. So you could see how effective narrative is. And when they're talking about doing the storytelling, they're usually talking about arguing cases in court, trying to argue less using, basically they like to use personal stories in order to kind of sway the audience of things. And this is just court shit. That's what all this stuff kind of comes from. It's the study of jurisprudence, which is the philosophy of law and things of that nature. And the other side is the activism side. So the activism side, or what you want to call the movement, that's kind of the wacky-ish side. That's kind of like the side that I'm like, this is dumb. Most of it. Some of it's okay. Even like some of the scholars within CRT who talk about how to progress these ideas, some of them are like, oh, you have to do it very slow and incrementally.
Yeah.
Because if you do it too fast, it's just going to cause like social upheaval and uproar, and it's not going to do you any good. And there are some scholars who think that you got to do it quickly. So there's not like a consensus on how to do this stuff. But going back into the curriculum, when I was talking about, there was a big criticism over at Teachers Union talking about implementing CRT. The Teachers Union is the National Education Association, and they had like some type of meeting, and then some conservatives got all crazy and they wiped like these meeting notes off their website. Interesting enough, I have a copy of their monthly newsletter because my wife's a teacher, and I looked over it, and they did talk about CRT in the newsletter, and I was going over it with a fine-tooth comb to see if I could find anything related to teaching kids to hate America or teaching kids to hate white people. And none of that is in this newsletter. It's basically just saying, there's some bad things that America did in its history. We got to teach both the good of America and the bad of our past in order to get a more objective view of our own history. Basically, it's like the difference between teaching a North Korean version of their history, which is like completely ridiculous, or being somewhat realistic about like our past, to praise the things that we did well and also to criticize the things that we did poorly. Because the only way you can progress is to look at the bad and try to criticize it instead of sweeping it under the rug. Like you can't change anything without looking at your flaws and being critical of your flaws. So that's kind of like that's the thing that's
in that sense,
like in
that sense, like banning CRT is just as bad as like erasing history, or we shouldn't teach this author because we shouldn't teach Tom Sawyer. We shouldn't let kids read Tom Sawyer because there's the N-word in it. There's a character named N-word Jim. Like those are equally bad ideas in my opinion. Like what you're describing just kind of sounds like nuance to me. What do you think?
Actually, before we get into it, I did take pictures of this newsletter, and it has a lesson plan. So this is kind of the important thing. A lesson plan is what a teacher makes, and that is what they're going to teach their kids. And if you like, I would read you one of the lessons plans from this newsletter. And you can go and say, hey, critique it or whatnot. When I read it, I was like, yeah, this ain't that bad. This seems kind of normal. But let me get the lesson plan here and let me know what you guys think, okay?
Okay.
All right, so here's the lesson plan. So
oh, you still there?
Were you able to hear me?
Yeah, your audio cut out for a second there. I can hear you now. Can you hear him, Chris?
Yeah, his audio did cut out for a second there, though.
Okay.
But yeah, we can hear me now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, lesson 1. Students consider the question of who should vote. First, they share their understanding of what makes a qualified voter. Then they reconsider after reading the oral history of African-American sharecropper Fannie Lou Hamer, in which she describes her attempt to register to vote in Mississippi in 1962. From Hamer's experience, several takeaways emerge. The government has been implicated in voter suppression. Voting restrictions are not abstract law. They impact real people's lives in concrete and powerful ways, and policies should be evaluated not only on their face, but also on the impact and historical and social context surrounding them. So these are some prompts to ask your students after talking about this topic.
What do you think about those, Chris?
So that's a CRT curriculum. The other thing I wanted to touch on too is I get the general consensus that conservatives have an issue with because you mentioned activism as a section of the CRTC or the critical race theory kind of spectrum, I guess, if you want to say it. And I'd agree with that. I think that it's the activism that a lot of conservatives have an issue with.
Well, this is like the in the context of this particular lesson, it's a part of American history. American history, we had Jim Crow laws that were very harsh against black people, and they had a hard time voting because if you're a black person, you went to vote, and they'd make these ridiculous rules where, okay, we're going to give you like a proficiency test. And it's not something they give everybody. They do it selectively. And of course, they're going to selectively give it to the black people. So it's basically talking about the historical context of voter suppression. It's not, it's part of learning about Jim Crow and stuff about that.
Gotcha. So
that doesn't.
Is it history disguised as critical race theory then?
Well, it is CRT.
Okay. So then, I mean, if that's the case, I don't think people would have a problem with that. But I think that.
Well, what they're saying is the voter suppression, the laws that put that in place were systemically racist. That's kind of what the CRT angle is. The CRT angle would be, okay, we're talking about a system that was systemically racist.
Okay. Yeah, see that's what we were talking about before, systemic racism. Like that's a term that I can understand why it triggers people. Like we talked about this before, like the way that critical race theorists define racism, like it definitely triggers people, and we've seen this in the comments of our videos. Yeah, like they're assuming
it triggers
it's
people.
Like bad. It's bad messaging. It's bad messaging. Like defund the police or Black Lives Matter or shit like that. It's almost like designed to confuse people, because systemic racism in this sense doesn't mean like white people bad. They be oppressing black people, bro.
Yeah, no, because people interpret it differently, right? So when you say systemic racism, people on the right or conservatives go like that, right? Because they think that's an attack on them personally as a white person, right? They think that, well, there's a lot of things involved in that. It's a complicated thing, right? But you could mean systemic racism. That could mean, is there a history of oppression for, minorities? Of course there is, right? Or it could mean, is it built into the actual system itself, right? Do you have these kind of like racism laws built into place where, you must hire more white people than black people, right? And obviously the answer to that is no. So conservatives view, well, obviously that to put them all under one blanket is, you know what I mean? But yeah, I would say a majority of conservatives view systemic racism as built into the actual system itself. Like black people can't go to Harvard or whatever because, whatever the case may be. Yeah.
Well, I'll say that there are. Okay, so Andrew, would you say?
Like, I think it's like definitions that people get hung up all the time, right? So like, right. I think, I don't know if this is true or not, but maybe this is what not got you guys in trouble. But this is maybe why the backlash, right? Because, I don't know. I always talk this. People love, some people love Prince, right? And they think that he's the best fucking musician ever, right? But then there's other people that listen to Prince and think that he's the worst ever, right? So some things can be subjective as well when you're reading them, and depending on how you interpret them, you know what I mean?
The hardest part is trying to convey how the personal interpretation of it. Like for me, I interpret racism as a subset of human psychology that is basically tribalism based on race. That's all it is basically. But nobody's going to get upset as fuck when we criticize tribalism. But once you start talking about racial tribalism, which is basically racism, people get all upset when you talk about that. So
yeah.
I understand because some people get super offended on both sides. When you talk about this stuff, some people appear to get offended for some, and I'm talking about both, conservatives and liberals. Like, what was the thing? It's like IKEA serving like fried chicken. I was like, okay, on Juneteenth. Yeah. And then it's like, yeah, black people like fucking fried chicken. Like, come on.
I do too. It's good.
Like, I watched a documentary on, African American cuisine, and they talked about fried chicken. They talked about a bunch of other different cuisines. Macaroni and cheese, that's a huge one.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, so the history of mac and cheese is that Thomas Jefferson's chef, who was a black man and a slave, he was sent to France to train in culinary arts. And one of the things he learned while he was in France was mac and cheese. But when he came back, he put his own American spin on it. So the way that we were introduced to this mac and cheese was basically through a black slave chef who came back and modified this recipe and served it to many guests of the Jefferson home. And that's how kind of word got out. And yeah, mac and cheese does have a lot of historical ties to slavery.
That's interesting. I never knew that. I wonder if they put milk or they put sour cream in it.
I forgot. There was this documentary where they basically, the ingredients were super simple, but the way that they made it was difficult because you needed like old time technology to do it. So you're doing it on a hearth instead of a stove.
Well, even to put together a block of cheese back in the 1800s was so difficult, right? You had to obviously cultivate the milk and wait for it to harden and mix it in with other, we take all these things for granted today, but back then it was fucking, it took weeks and weeks and weeks. So
right, it was making mac and cheese back then was no joke.
Yeah, for sure.
But the thing is, and the thing about me and Andrew, like, we will criticize.
Knuckle asked if that applies to craft dinner.
I don't know. Craft dinner is like the shittiest version of mac and cheese that you can get.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, what were you saying?
No, I'm saying like, me and Andrew are not like super CRT fans and shit. We will criticize the stuff we think is stupid. Like, and there's always things in different schools of thought that you can adopt and use. It doesn't mean you got to adopt and use every single piece of information or thing that they are promoting.
No, but I think another point that conservatives worry about is that if you give these people an inch as well.
I just started hearing an echo. Did you guys start hearing an echo?
An echo?
Yeah, I'm hearing an echo.
No, I don't have any.
That's weird.
Yeah, no echoes here.
What I was saying is that I think some conservatives, and I don't know, but I get that if you give these people just an inch, right, they go and they'll take advantage of it years down the road. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
like for me, as a parent, and my baseline, I'll start off by saying this. I am a father of 2 kids that go to a Catholic school.
Okay.
So I'm not really an atheist, nor am I very much a religious person. But I always think that when my sons get to a certain age and they start to question, all that kind of stuff, I'm going to have an honest conversation with them and then let them decide which way they go from there and not really indoctrinate.
Right. But there are going to be people who will do the opposite of what you're doing too. You know,
For sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, yeah, it's a tough one because.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, like, there's many conversations I want to have with, or I'm gonna have to have probably with my kids as they get older in life. But I just, I'm not something. This isn't. I say agree with banning CRT and CRT in school, but I just don't understand. And again, I come from a place of ignorance that I don't understand why this is even a topic raised in education at all. Like, you know what I mean? I just don't think that, especially in the younger grades, maybe in the older grades, talking about it historically, obviously, because, you know, there's a lot of oppression and there's, you know, Jim Crow era and all that kind of stuff has definitely got to be educated to our youth so they know about it. But labeled under the umbrella of CRT, I don't even think you have to do, right? You could just label this as like American history or, you know, European history or whatever history you want to teach it. I just, yeah, I think conservatives, and for me, again, I don't know that much. Like I said before, I think that, like, I worry about Ibram X. Kendi coloring books in grade schools, right? I just don't understand why this is. And I get there's fundamentalism surrounding all this. Obviously, that's the part that I don't want about this. If it was just like, this is what it is, it's a simple history lesson to teach, you know, about oppression in the school system, that's totally fine. But it always starts off as something small like this, and then it turns into yada yada yada. And going back to another point I wanted to touch on real quick before I forget, because you brought up like this whole like hating of America. And I do find that there is this kind of aura of hating of, like, here in Canada, you know, Canada Day just passed, and there was a huge conversation of like, should we even celebrate that these days? And I think in the West there is this kind of decline.
Oh yeah, you hear about the Tim Hortons orange donuts?
Yeah, for like
what's that?
Right?
It's like, hey, come to the Tim Hortons started selling these donuts with orange icing, and you buy them in support of the oppression of indigenous people, and the money apparently goes to indigenous charities. I just thought that's fucking stupid. Like, that's just virtue signaling. Oh, yes, 100%. I'd like the orange donut, please.
Well, why is it orange?
I'm a very good person.
Orange represents the color of, there was a Montreal indigenous woman that, similar to Rosa Parks, where they told her to sit on the back of the bus, she was told she couldn't wear an orange shirt to school one day. As an indigenous person, she put up a big, you know, I forget the other part of the story, but basically it became a Canadian thing. And people wear, there's an orange shirt day here. We have indigenous kind of.
You know what's funny about that?
It's kind of like a BLM, is what I was going to say. Is that it's kind of like,
yeah,
there's a lot of activism involved in it, although the underlying message of it is actually.
There's also some corporatism.
Oh yeah, there's corporatism and
all that stuff.
Even
they're like, oh, come in and get your orange donut.
Exactly.
Like, why don't they just donate the money? Why do you have to have people come in and buy your stupid donut?
Yeah, exactly.
If you wanna like forward the cause, just fucking donate the money. Like, you're trying to advertise stuff so people can buy your shit.
Yeah,
and you're like,
you're a noble work corporation over here at Tim Hortons.
It's a distraction. It's showing, hey, look, we're on the good side, guys. We're Tim Hortons. We care about indigenous people, right? It's like Lockheed Martin throwing up a pride flag every month. Meanwhile, they're bombing everybody in third world countries, right? So, yeah, this is all like a show for everybody. Look what we're doing. Meanwhile, they could donate to indigenous people every day if they really wanted to, but they don't. They just pick one day out of the year. Hey, we're on board with that because they don't want to be shamed. You know, they don't want to be the next Chick-fil-A or whatever.
Yeah.
Chick-fil-A.
So, Chris, I don't remember, like, according to what we've now explained about critical race theory's definition of systemic racism, do you think that vaccine mandates are systemically racist in that way?
No, I think the vaccine's available to anybody. I just think the stats are, unfortunately, that Black people are choosing and minorities are choosing not to get vaccinated for whatever reason. And amen to that if that's their decision. There could be a variety of reasons to that too. Maybe they don't have access to, get a cab to go get a vaccine. Maybe, I mean, there's also a history there of Black people and, having medical products tested on them in horrible ways throughout history, right? So there's also that skepticism of the medical community as well within the Black community. But I just...
So, I think, because I don't know if you heard the way we explained it, but the mandate itself is infringing on the freedoms more of the people who don't want to take these things, these vaccines.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just so happens to be the case that
like in New York City,
Black
for example,
don't like the vaccine.
Yeah. And I get what you're saying. So, like in New York, for example, if Black people, let's say 20% of Black people aren't getting vaccinated in New York City, but they can't go to a restaurant now. Is that racism in a way because they're not being allowed into an establishment? I mean, my argument would be like, why are these restaurants being mandated a vaccine for a virus that's like not even that deadly to begin with? That would be my baseline for that argument. So,
yeah, it's just weird. There's still patio seating at a lot of places. I don't know. It's just New York is weird like that. That's not happening where I live.
We're in the same. We're in the same situation here in Ontario. There's a vaccine mandate. You have to have a vaccine passport before you go into a restaurant. But I mean, I work in an industry where I'm in and out of businesses all the time. Do you think they asked me for a vaccine passport? I was in 2 restaurants today. No vaccine passport asked for me. But yet they'll ask their patrons when they come through the door. But no, they can't ask their employees. So none of this makes any sense. It's the same as you going to a restaurant and taking down your mask and allowing to eat and drink and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. Yeah.
None of this is based on scientific evidence whatsoever. It's all about just like control and seeing what they can get away with, and just the government being ridiculous and worrying about not getting themselves in trouble due to Twitter mobs and shit. So, well, there's a lot of shit at play in here, COVID, all that social media, all that kind of stuff, but it all ties in together. You know what I mean? Like the citizens are scared, which creates the government to be scared as well. And it creates a snowball effect. And
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we've talked before about the inconsistencies of how all of these policies are being implemented, and like I really wouldn't want to fucking be a politician. Like in these sorts of situations, it's impossible to make a good decision because it's impossible to please everyone or even the majority of everyone at this point because people are so tribal about COVID, and it's
right.
and there's so, like we were talking about how there's so much bad messaging coming from critical race theory too, even though like for the most part I think it's like in terms of like trying to change laws to address like systemic issues in the criminal justice system, like we were talking about before in terms of racially and class disparate outcomes in terms of the consequences of drug laws, basically. So it's like similar to that.
One thing too is that CRT mainly is about sparking policy discussions.
Yeah.
So it's not talking about, random white supremacists rallying in the streets or anything. It's about how policy shapes disparities in specific ways.
Mm-hmm.
And and the problem is it's like there's a lot of
labeled under critical race theory, right? It shouldn't be labeled under. If it's policy changes, that should be under I don't know, educational municipality.
The only thing is that the target is race specific, so they're not talking about class disparities or gender disparities or disparities based off of sexuality or based off of national origin. And when I say national origin, like, you're white, but you might have like some weird thick accent or something. It's specifically policies that create racial disparities. which is weird. Like, I don't know why the focus specifically on race. I don't know if they're because here's the thing, like, it's not like they're teaching everything that they teach under the guise of CRT. It's not like, oh, let's teach CRT math and CRT reading and CRT physics. That's not what it is. It's just, hey, let's look at this policy here and see how it affects along racial lines. That's basically all it is. And you know, it's not, oh, math is racist, oh, physics is, it's not, it has nothing to fucking do with that, you know.
I don't even know where people are getting those claims from. I really don't. Like, I haven't even seen someone like Robin DiAngelo say that shit, but maybe like Ibrahim X Kennedy does. I actually haven't read his book, so
no, I don't know anything about those crazy people.
I've heard those arguments before, because they're making the argument that the white people created math and that it's a system based in oppression, that you're using that mathematics and that,
that's not part of CRT though.
No, that's sure.
That's like the retarded like wokeism crap.
Just
like if anyone's teaching that, that's just because they're teaching because they're a dumb woke asshole. It's not because it's CRT.
Well, it's like I've told you guys before about my my teacher in sociology at my local college that I went to, where she was like the epitome of wokeness. Like every class was about, okay, let's talk about racism and gender and class disparities and also fat phobia. Did you know that if you're morbidly obese and look like Jabba the Hutt, there's actually nothing biologically unhealthy about that?
Did she actually say this to you?
Yeah, I think I told you guys. She showed us a TED talk with this like fucking woman who looks like Jabba the Hutt, and she's saying there's nothing scientifically biologically unhealthy about the way I look. I take pride in my Jabba the Huttness. She didn't say it exactly that way, of course, but that was the message expressed, and my teacher was basically agreeing with that.
No. Like being overweight is not healthy.
No.
Like there's definitely like some health effects. Like you're more likely to develop specific diseases from having extra weight. It's not even questionable. Like it's called a disease for a reason.
Diabetes. Yeah.
When you have a disease, you're not healthy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure.
That's the exact opposite of healthy.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it sounds like your sociology teacher was just like all steeped in that crazy wokeness. Like I understand Lindsay's criticisms of these like particular types of people. The problem is that he labels everything as that, and that's not the case.
Like all of this stuff is critical race theory and postmodernism, even though like 90% of it has nothing to do with that shit.
No, but I think, and not to defend Lindsay here for a minute, but I get the feeling, because he's buddies with Peter Boghossian, and I think the red flag that they're trying to set up here is that there's a lot of, because Boghossian just he resigned from his university recently, but there's this
heard that.
There's not a diversity of thought going on right now in a lot of these institutions, and if you do have, like if you're a conservative going to a university right now, right, like
well, it depends on which university.
Yeah, that's true. It depends on what university, and it would depend on what state you're in too, right? Like if you're in Texas or Utah versus fucking like,
if you're going to like Texas A&M, I don't think you're going to have problems with wokeness on campus.
For sure, but I think the argument that Lindsay and Boghossian would make here is that no matter what state you're in and what university you're at, you shouldn't be, like not banning conservatives speaking at your school or whatever. But I think you guys know what I'm getting at, like the,
like their conservative viewpoints should be allowed to be expressed.
Yeah, that, and like, even if you should be able to discuss ideas without, having safe spaces or like, trigger warnings or any of this kind of stuff. And I do think they make there's something to be said about how this is kind of started in the universities and is kind of built up into not all of the chaos that's going on right now, but I would say a little portion of what is going on with wokeness and like, COVID and, Hollywood and government and you name it, this all has to do with a bunch of those people that were, grew up in safe spaces. Universities have now graduated and gotten jobs from there, right? Not all of it, there's still sane people out there and there's still people making decisions. I would still make the argument that a lot of people with higher power don't have that much power to begin with, but
well, yeah, I totally get the arguments. I guess the problem with me is that I'd rather get those discussed from someone who actually practices social science and social psychology.
Yeah.
So if you take, like, you can find some criticisms of that particular issue from very well-reasoned individuals like Jonathan Haidt. He's definitely has covered this, but he's not, screaming at the top of his lungs, using slippery slope fallacies about how everything's going to become communist and Soviet. He tries to legitimately like look at these issues and find an actual solution. Like, I know his solution for these types of things were, of course, you have to keep room for discussion, have discussion for these ideas, but you also can't just outright be like a crazy person.
No, I don't. I wouldn't say they're being a crazy person. Okay, I'll
well, like Haidt. One of the things, the fundamental that Haidt talks about is like, it's not by the college age. You've actually the problems actually start quite younger than college. So, and when he looks at it, he's going back into very like elementary school, and how minds are shaped from there. And it's not necessarily political. It's how you let your child explore the world. So are you going to be...
Yeah, like helicopter parenting is more like what he talks about. He doesn't talk about like any like critical race theory or postmodernism or shit like that in that sense in The Coddling of the American Mind.
Yeah, he does talk about like intersectionality and stuff like that, but he also gives it like a more nuanced view of that. And he says, there are some times where looking things in this way is pretty useful. But when it comes to I guess what he says is, when you don't let people experience hardship, then they're not going to be vaccinated, so to speak, for hardships in the future.
Yeah, that's where he gets that idea of anti-fragile. Like, human beings have an anti-fragile immune system, right? You don't want to lather up yourself with fucking, antibacterial soap all the time, because then you won't build up your immune system. And same kind of thing goes for your thinking. You want to challenge yourself. You want to exert your mental capabilities from time to time you want to like prepare yourself when shit goes down, because life is not always, roses. It's,
So a lot of the wokeness you see is an appeal to an authority to fix their problem. It doesn't necessarily have to be like that. Like, you don't need to appeal to an authority to fix something. Like, it's, you can just directly talk to the person that aggrieved you. You don't have to go, oh, administrator, this person aggrieved me. It's like, why don't you just fucking talk it out?
This is reminding me, actually. I should send you guys. I watched this interesting podcast yesterday with Coleman Hughes and Kamele Foster, who
I've had today.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I thought that was interesting because Kamele Foster was basically making a conservative case for why CRT should not be banned, because he was basically expressing the sentiment that you shouldn't be afraid of these ideas. Instead of doing that, you should get involved in your local community and try to help to influence people and politicians to form education plans for focusing on the things that we want our children to learn and the way we want our children to learn them, rather than like banning ideas. And like like people should not be banned from asking questions like critical race theory bring up. You should be allowed to interrogate those questions, even if they initially sound ridiculous, like we were talking about. Like if you say like the criminal justice system is systemically racist, if you're not, you could feasibly be prevented from asking that question in a class if you ban critical race theory.
Yeah, or how something is like not basically, this as a whole is this. Typically, I think that's a bad way to approach it. Like the lesson plan that I had read, I think that's the perfect way to approach it, where they're taking a very specific aspect like voter suppression and talking about how that is discriminatorily racist, how it affects people of certain colors and what are its effects. And the thing about voter suppression too is that on the books, there is nothing specifically racist about it. So when we're talking about making it more difficult to vote, it impacts certain people more than it impacts other people more. And that's basically what we're saying. It impacts a certain race more. On the outset, it could be just like, we're Republicans and we want more people to vote Republican, and we want to make it harder for people to vote Democratic. Even if that is their goal, the problem is a bunch of black people vote Democratic. So there's going to be some type of racial component there, just even if it's like a secondary issue. That's kind of what they're talking about.
In terms of like voter suppression, that reminded me. I also listened to the latest Glenn Lowry and John McWhorter podcast yesterday, and John McWhorter was talking about a recent article he wrote in which he was talking about redlining laws and some interesting statistics that he learned about it, which I thought were really interesting and nuanced. He was saying that when redlining districts were first drawn out, these areas were actually majority white people populations, but they made them in that way. They designed the redlining zones in that way specifically because there were lower class black people there who they thought could be a problem. So I think it's interesting because they were instituted in areas that were actually majority white people populations, but they were targeted at the minority of black people within these majority black people populations. So it's not as clear cut as like they were targeting these majority black people populations. So the outcomes of redlining actually affected white people more than black people, even though it affected black people in a more negative way than it affected white people.
Right. Yeah, CRT. The only reason I've been talking about it so much lately is because it's actually a big local issue here. Like every week, there's a news story about some school board coming to blows because that's the funny thing over here is that people will fight at school board meetings. It's just on its face. Sounds completely ridiculous on its face, but yeah, that's what happens over here. People getting put on administrative leave for not using pronouns. That stuff happens here. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, that's fucked up.
But yeah, man, it's like the biggest reason I wanted, because I like investigating boogeyman shit. Like people, this is gonna lead to the downfall of society. It's like, okay, let's see what this shit is.
The Sovietization of America.
Yeah. I just wanted to see it, take a nuanced look at it, take what's useful, discard what's useless, make it my own. There's definitely some useful stuff in CRT, and there's definitely some stupid bullshit in the more like fringe versions. I don't think any of that at all, especially any of that D'Angelo shit. You can flush that down the toilet. For what I would say. But the thing is, it's like whenever CRT is attacked, it seems like, let me hold up white fragility, and this is all that CRT is this white fragility book and how white people need to be guilty. I was like, no, that's kind of not good, nor is it in any of the fundamental tenets of CRT. Like CRT is not, let's make white people feel guilty. That is what CRT is. That's like, no. It's about just addressing systemic shit. It's not about let's guilt white people into being activists and allies. That's not what it is. That's not what it should be, at least. But from what I read, that's not really what it is. And
no, but that's what like Ibram Kendi and Robert D'Angelo kind of come from, right? And they're touted as being like people that,
Well, usually one of the things I like to make the comparison of, it's like taking Stefan Molyneux and saying, this is conservatism.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is conservatism. And then they, take Stefan Molyneux or, Jared Taylor, and they take those folks and say, this is conservatism. Look at this.
Yeah.
Even though it's a pretty wide range of opinions within conservatism.
It's like lefty YouTubers who you and I follow, like Vosh, for example, who I think he's got some really interesting opinions, but one thing that annoys me about him is that he gets way too extreme on the opposite end of the spectrum of people like James Lindsay, who are demonizing critical race theory and acting like all of critical race theory is this lefty woke shit. It's just like on the opposite end of the spectrum, people, uber lefties like Vosh saying, conservatives are all dumb because conservatism always leads to fascism. These people are idiots or they're just evil fascists.
Like, basically, he's using a rhetorical device that he would probably condemn using if someone said, all lefties lead to the gulag. He's of course going to use some type of argumentation to say that's not the case.
Yeah.
You guys keep saying all these lefties when it comes to education, but I'm not going to lie. Like, do you think that like 90% of educators are conservative these days? Like,
no, I wouldn't say so.
Depends on where you're at. It depends on where you're at.
A majority of educational places I know, and I just know around here. Well, I know a few other provinces too, because I know a lot of teachers. But like, they're like maybe one of the only people in the whole entire school that's thinks maybe right leaning or whatever.
No, I wouldn't say that, because there are. Well, I'm talking about America, so I don't know how it would be over in Canada or whatever. But there are studies here in America that show that the Civil War is taught pretty much on a 50-50 split, whether it was about slavery or states' rights.
Yeah, but that's okay.
makes sense.
That's one issue, though. I mean, like in general, I would say that educators are more left leaning. No,
They might be, but even if they are left leaning, they're still half of them are still teaching the Civil War as being a states' rights issue over fighting over slavery.
That's interesting.
Like that's
That makes
a
me think too.
statistic. Yeah.
That makes me think too about like how much it might depend on where you are, because I'm here in like uber conservative Alberta, and like we have an upcoming local election, and when you can vote in the election, you vote for mayor and you vote for school board members, and like the like a lot of the school board members probably are like right-leaning people, and then it depends on which school board you're talking about, because there's a public school board and then there's a Catholic school board too, and then the Catholic school board for obvious reasons seems to be more conservative leaning, but then also for upcoming
not here, man. Our Catholic school board is super lefty.
Oh, that's interesting. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's the other way. It's the other way here, but for the
like they got rid of police in Catholic school. They used to have police officers come to the schools to educate you on like drugs and like alcohol and not to drink and drive. And nope, kiboshed all that kind of stuff. They hopped right on board with like defund the police and all that kind of stuff.
Oh wow, okay.
And a bunch of other stuff, which is totally fine. I mean, yeah, to say that. I mean, there is probably some religious sects that have super right and conservative leaning schools and shit like that. But for the most part, I would say the public and the Catholic school board is super left here in Canada. And Dusty's right. It's probably different in the States where you have a lot of,
Well, I think it's different here in Alberta too. At least it seems that way in specifically here in Fort McMurray, and other people I know who have like my relatives in Edmonton and Calgary, for example. But I was gonna say, like in terms of the school board member candidates that I've seen advertising for our upcoming local election, a lot of them actually are using these woke catchphrases. Like some of them are saying in their election platforms, diversity. I'm like, the fuck does that mean? What kind of diversity what do you actually mean by this shit? So that kind of shit seems like some aspect of wokeness to me. So I mean, that like that I can understand how people who have kids could be worried about that in their school board, like promoting diversity, but it depends on what it means too, because people can mean like just like an example might be, I read an article about how a local Catholic school started doing this thing where they're bringing these courses to kids where they go and get taught by an indigenous guy skills like how to hunt and trap and build a fire and stuff like that, which if that falls into the category of diversity, I think it can be a really good thing, because I think those are super useful skills and I don't know how to do that shit and I wish I did. So it depends on what you mean by it. Like it could be the Robin DiAngelo shit, like all white people bad, all black people good, but it could also mean like teaching kids valuable skills from other cultures that are not as common in like white middle class North American cultures or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know. I do see as a parent, I do see kind of these little seeds of wokeism that have kind of crept through differently than even when I'm not even that old, but I'm a student of the 90s and this shit wasn't around when I was, back then.
If I heard my teacher, if you heard your school's teacher saying that, white people should feel guilty, I would be as offended as you would be.
Yeah. I've never heard my teacher say that, but there's been a few there's been a number of things that have come up where I see the culture shifting in one way because I kind of pay attention to culture issues and it gets seeped in through our, like I'm in an Ontario, not small town, but like, I don't know. It's just like and we don't, not to get into it, but like I'll give you a perfect example. Obviously, when the George Floyd stuff went down, our local school or our school is sending out, how we can, be proactive in racism issues around our school when we've never had any issues of racism whatsoever. They sent out like, what can we do better surveys to the parents and stuff like that. And we have a super, like in Canada here, it's super diverse, right? Like, yeah, it's a multicultural thing. We never had.
Maybe those surveys just didn't return anything. They maybe were just like asking to see if there were any issues, and
for sure. And maybe they're just putting that out to make it look like they're like, doing their part, right? That's awesome. But I don't know. To sit here and say that no wokeism and no left has infiltrated our educational system, I see it all the time. And I'm not saying it's gone off the deep end as far as James Lindsay, where everybody's putting on a fucking sickle and hammer
sickle, yeah,
and fucking saying that.
Well,
this is greatest.
Look at that person; they're wearing the communist fists on their hat.
Yeah.
Like he's always pointing out like these physical characteristics of people. It's like, come on.
Yeah, the left is definitely taking over. That's one thing
that bothers me about public intellectuals like James Lindsay, and like Jordan Peterson and Dave Rubin and all those people are saying about these things like critical race theory and whatnot. Like they're linking them all together and then they're demonizing all these fields of thought. Whereas like Dusty was saying, and like there is some cringe shit in critical race theory, and there is in critical theory too, and there is in all of this stuff, and even in postmodernism a little bit, in my opinion. But I think that this stuff is all really worthwhile to read and learn about, because there's a lot of really interesting ideas in there, and demonizing the whole thing outright as like this woke bullshit stuff that's trying to institute like the Sovietization of American shit is just like fucking batshit crazy. And it's like it's preventing people from learning about things that have value, even if they're like radical views. Like just radical views are interesting to entertain, even if you disagree with them completely. Like I read one of the famous critical theory texts from the Frankfurt School by Adorno and Horkheimer called The Dialectic of Enlightenment. And one of the main messages was that the Enlightenment was a mistake and is inherently anti-Semitic, and the Nazis were the epitome of reason. I disagree with that, but it's a pretty interesting opinion because it's so radical. That's why it's interesting to me.
Yeah, no, Lindsay's gone off the deep end, and like I get like, well, okay, sorry, I don't know if Lindsay's gone off the deep end because I haven't paid that much attention, but I get the fundamentalism of that argument of like people that think that we're being run by Soviets. But I do think that the culture and education and media and a bunch of these institutions that pretty much run everything, tech is another one, are predominantly run by the left. And I'll give you an example. Like, I'm a student in the 90s. Like I said, I grew up watching Saturday Night Live. In the 90s, Sinead O'Connor went on and she ripped that picture of the Pope on. Everybody remembers that, right? And the right went fucking nuts. And what happened with Sinead O'Connor? You don't hear about her at all. She was pretty much canceled. See you later. Bye. If that was to happen today, right? And the reason that happened is because conservatives and the right ran culture. They ran media. They ran all these institutions that the left does today, right? That's why you had, Public Enemy with parental advisory stickers in the corner on it because they were worried about language and shit like that, right? Now today, let's say Sinead O'Connor is hosting next week on Saturday Night Live. She rips up a picture of the Pope. She would be fucking celebrated. She would be high-fived, and everybody would love the shit. Or why? Because the left runs our culture right now, and the right doesn't, right? And that would be like tearing up the Pope. That's all I think that Lindsay, Peterson, Rubin, all those guys are just pointing out all that shit in a baseline way. Yes, they get some of that stuff wrong, but that's what the IDW has kind of pointed out. And you know what I mean? And I don't know. I agree with that.
I think they're exaggerating though.
100%.
Like they have a point, but they're exaggerating, and then they're massively oversympathizing and demonizing worthwhile schools of thought.
For sure. Yeah, we all, yeah, I don't know. We're all hyperbolic, I guess. And I guess when you get to that level of being an entertainer or whatever, you kind of, yeah, you do exaggerate it. I like, again, my baseline for all these human beings is like, you know, they're going to say stuff that I agree with and stuff that I don't agree with. But I get my general consensus from the IDW, James Lindsay, Peterson, all those guys, is that they're trying to point out where the left has kind of gone way too far. Sometimes they get that right, sometimes they get that wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But going back to my original point that the left has been kind of like runs the culture, which is fine. I don't give a fuck, right? It doesn't matter. To
Like
me.
popular culture, yeah, they definitely run it.
Awesome. It's just like you're gonna make some mistakes if you're in a culture that's dominated by the left. Same as there's
Well, it
gonna be
also
some.
depends, though, because if you go to certain parts of the country, you're not going to hear, like just driving through the United States, you can always tell something apart about where you're driving through based off of what radio stations are available.
Yeah.
So, to be honest, in certain places, like a lot of that left culture doesn't have a lot of relevance.
For sure.
Like if you turn on the radio, it's just like a bunch of either right wing talk shows or country music, and you won't really hear any top 40 stations out in certain places.
That's the same here. Cities, Toronto, like, you know, the major metropolises, you're going to see nothing but blue political signs up. As soon as you get in the rural areas, it's nothing but red signs, and country radio stations and pastors telling, you know, anti-vax stories and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? It's just, yeah.
I don't live, like, I don't live in the rural or conservative county, so I don't know what the actual saturation is there. So it's really hard to say, but you know, Fox is the biggest news network in the country. That should tell you something.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but it's like it's the biggest of a news medium that is like dying. Like if you look at, I bet you if Fox's numbers, if you were to compare that to like 20 years ago, that they would be near the bottom of the pile, right? I don't think.
Well, yeah, you got Fox, you got OAN, you know, because now it's being split a bunch of split amongst the entire media sphere. So we're talking podcasts, YouTubers.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking about. Like, there are a lot of lefty and righty, really, really popular YouTubers.
For sure, but I would say more popular than like Fox, unless you're like Tucker Carlson or who's the other guy, Hannity or something like that. One of like their major guys, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because their major guys have major clout. You know, it's like Tucker Carlson. Doesn't he command like the biggest audience out of all like the talking head shows?
I'm pretty sure he does, doesn't he?
Yeah. So
he did.
I think the only talking head show on the left that I could think of is Maddow, and he's full of shit too. So
yeah. And those guys like what's that guy's name? Brian Stelter? I don't know how popular he is, but I see people making videos criticizing him and he seems super cringe.
I have no idea.
Like, did you guys see the Rogan thing with CNN recently?
With Sanjay? I thought that was a really good episode.
I thought that was interesting. Yeah.
I was like,
Rogan seems like super triggered by vaccines and stuff like that.
Yeah,
but it was interesting.
I think he set that up on purpose though, because he had that
the horse dewormer.
Yeah.
Or he had somebody on before the I forget his name.
Alex Berenson. Is that what you're thinking?
That guy.
Of?
He had that guy on, and then the next day he had Gupta on afterwards, right? So I think like he set that up in a way was like, here's two different sides of, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I thought that was cool. Yeah,
it was a pretty interesting like discussion.
Yeah. But what I wanted to bring up there is like the CNN thing, right? So like Gupta goes on Joe Rogan and says like horse dewormer, but then he went on with Don Lemon. Did you guys see that clip on CNN later? And was like,
no, I didn't.
Oh man,
what happened?
What was that?
He went back. Oh shit, I should send it to you. But anyway, Gupta went back on CNN with Don Lemon afterwards and pretty much said, "Oh yeah, no, it's horse dewormer. The statistics show that it like pretty much doubled down on what he said,
Wow.
like going back on against Rogan." I'll send you the clip. It's fucking outrageous. But anyway,
yeah. The funny thing is like there's actually a story that I guess Gupta didn't know, because here's what was happening. Actually, during that time, is that the CDC tweeted something out, basically saying, "You're not livestock. Don't take this, whatever." And instead, I don't know what the hell CNN was doing, but they were just quoting the CDC, basically equating to that was what Joe Rogan took, which wasn't true. He didn't take the horse dewormer version.
Yeah, he took the human
like a
version.
paste.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was. Well, I have this. You have to send us that clip if you get the chance. I want to take a look at that to see.
I
could load the page and.
I just sent it to you, Andrew, on our group chat, so you can bring it up.
Okay. Yeah, that would be unfortunate if he went back on that, because I know he said that CNN was wrong to say that, and he said that multiple times during the podcast.
Yeah,
I also thought it was funny that Joe Rogan didn't understand a statistic. I was like, Joe, you're not understanding the statistic. The one he was using was like, oh yeah, there are more people that go to the hospital with COVID than they do from myocarditis or whatever it was. And the problem with that is it was an apple and oranges comparison.
Wasn't he saying Sanjay Gupta saying yeah, but you're much more likely to get myocarditis from COVID than the vaccine?
Well, what he was saying is that most people who get myocarditis aren't hospitalized.
Yeah, and most people have recovered from it, right?
Right. And he also said most people when you get COVID, you're more likely to get myocarditis. That's what he was saying.
Yeah.
And myocarditis is treatable typically. And I guess Joe wasn't understanding that kind of how tricky statistics can get. Which is kind of like how people get fooled all the time. Put this statistic right next to it. But there's a course on YouTube. I forgot, it's called like Detecting Bullshit. It's like a college level course. And one of these sections of the course, they talk about deceptive statistics. And that is actually one. Because you would have to compare hospitalizations of those who got COVID, so he was comparing to those who got myocarditis versus those who went to the hospital, and those are two different comparisons, unfortunately.
Right.
And he didn't get it at the time. I was like, come on, Joe.
And he's like, also like sometimes he mentions anecdotes or single studies, but then
I was like, immune system. I'm just going to use my immune system. Yeah. Okay, Joe. Yeah. And then you took like all this kitchen sink shit. If your immune system is so fucking awesome, why are you taking all this shit to get over COVID?
And why did you get COVID in the first place? Like,
well, his explanation is because he was getting drunk and stuff. But like, obviously, if you got to take all this other shit, then it's not your immune system. Like, if your immune system was super robust, you wouldn't have to have taken anything.
Yeah, and also like it's like
but he's a millionaire though, and if you have like I'm not gonna lie, man. If I was Joe Rogan, I was a billionaire, and I have every kind of specialist and doctor at my disposal, and I get COVID, whatever you guys say, I'm taking. You know what I mean?
Whatever.
I would too.
Yeah. Same with
whatever it takes.
Yeah. Well, like he's saying, like, misunderstanding scientific data, like you said, like he was saying with Alex Berenson, and a lot of people are doing this, saying you can get the vaccine. I know people who got the vaccine and they got COVID. I'm like, oh, okay.
of
Well,
course.
your
It's anecdotal.
your anecdote is a very, 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 very rare anomaly, and also if you get the vaccine, you're less likely to get COVID than you don't get it, and if you get COVID, you're like 90% less likely to experience hospitalization and death. That's kind of an important thing.
Yeah, most of the people that die are unvaccinated. It's not even disputable. Yeah, there's some people who are going to die that are vaccinated, but it's going to be on the extreme end of health. So if someone dies while they're vaccinated of COVID, that's because they have a lot of comorbidities or any of that.
Comorbidities.
Comorbidity.
That's another thing too, because Rogan's
like, just promote health, just get healthy.
Yeah,
like not everybody has the time to invest, the time and money to invest in their health. Like, if someone's working like 60 hours a week, like how are they gonna find the time to really get in the gym? Prepare meals, healthy meals for themselves. It's hard.
And also, like, in terms of comorbidities too, Joe Rogan often points out, and it is a good point that a lot of public health officials are saying, like, you should get healthier and work out and follow a healthier diet and stuff. But he always points out, most people who got COVID have the overwhelming majority of them have comorbidities, but yet he doesn't also see that the people who get the vaccine and then have side effects from it, most of those people also had comorbidities.
Right.
Like, it's not a dichotomy here. This is a false dichotomy.
Right. I don't know. He's just like super anti-vax now because he had some anecdotal experiences where people had adverse effects to the vaccine. I think that was his explanation. That people he knows had the vaccine and they had issues with that.
Yeah.
Like, it's understandable because he had personal experience where some people were very unlucky. But on the whole, the data is in the millions on the effects of the vaccine. And I know even he was talking about how VAERS isn't super reliable as far as documenting vaccine harm and bad effects. And Gupta made some good points. Hey, this is a new disease. Like, we don't know what can happen. And if you think about a disease like chicken pox, right? Imagine if that's a new disease, chicken pox, and then you get it when you're young, and then 50 years later you develop shingles. Like, what can you develop 50 years later from this virus? You never know what kind of other issues this virus might have. Maybe it can lay dormant like many viruses do, and it can come back and have some other type of disease that manifests later in life. So there's that question. And, do you want to roll the dice with, hey, let me roll the dice with COVID, even though I don't know if there's going to be some type of later disease that can develop, 20 years down the line. We don't know. Like, maybe people who catch COVID get some type of other disease, just like when you catch chicken pox, you have a chance of getting the shingles later in life.
Yeah.
Same thing with HPV. Like HPV, you catch that, and if you don't clear it, it could give you cancer later in life. I don't know if coronavirus can give you. Yeah, HPV will give you cancer, man.
Oh, wow.
Like, most cervical cancers are caused by HPV. And
okay.
if you're like, some people develop throat cancers from HPV, and the reason they
Oh,
develop
wow.
throat cancers is from eating a girl out that has HPV, and it embeds that shit in your throat, and then it comes
Oh,
back
wow.
as a cancer. Um,
Oh, okay.
the bad thing is there's no test for men to detect HPV. The only test that detects HPV currently is in the Pap smear.
Oh, okay.
So if you're a dude that has it, the only way you're gonna know, because it doesn't always develop into cancer. Sometimes it'll just go away and not come back. But if you do develop throat cancer, that's the only time you're gonna know when you had it. You still had HPV.
Oh, wow.
HPV is actually the most prevalent STD. I think.
I heard that. I remember
Yeah,
looking that up a few
most people
years
have had it.
ago. I remember finding that out when I looked it up a few years ago. I've
Yeah,
heard that
so
I've heard that it's like way more harmful for women too.
right, it is. It's quite harmful for women. Like, that's the number one cause of cervical cancer is HPV.
Wow.
So that's what I'm talking about. Viruses can cause cancer. Who knows?
Yep.
Maybe the coronavirus might do that. Maybe it'll have some lesser disease like shingles. What do you want to roll the dice for? Man, do you want to take the vaccine and not get the corona? And who knows? Maybe the corona variant or the Delta variant might have this long disease, like dormant disease. So it's up in the air, man. It's all about making a calculated decision. Like, to be honest, I don't want to catch COVID at all. Like, I don't want to have to deal. Like, even if I get an asymptomatic version where nothing happens to me, like, I don't know if this thing is going to come back years and years later and bite me in the ass somewhere else, like some other viruses do. So if
Yeah.
I have the chance, I just don't want to catch it at all, and I'll use strategies to make sure I don't catch it. I'd rather get vaccinated and increase my chances of not having to deal with this unknown. At least the vaccine you're not being injected even with a dead virus. It's not even that. It's just instructions to make
Yeah,
your
that's
cells produce a protein. That's all it is. It's not. There's no dormant virus. So
yeah,
I don't
that's
know, man.
the mRNA one, right?
Right?
With
Yeah, the
the
mRNA,
I
and then
think
there's the.
I think your audio cut out there for a sec, Dusty.
Oh, it did. Oh
Um,
no.
but
Oh
I think I
no.
remember hearing that's the advantage of the mRNA vaccine specifically, that it doesn't even give you the actual virus. It gives you instructions to form a protein that prevents you from getting the virus, that kind of like acts like it's giving you a little bit of the virus to trigger the immune response, just like how a regular vaccine works.
Well, it tells your cells to make the protein that the virus would make, but even the protein that your cells make is like a slightly modified version of what the virus would make in order to make it less harmful.
Oh,
As
okay.
because I know the protein that um, the virus produces is cytotoxic, and the one that the vaccines produce is not, because it doesn't split. I think Gupta talked about it a little bit, where he says, yeah, the virus has this unique thing where once the protein attaches, it splits, and then that causes some problems. The one from the vaccine doesn't do that, so it's different. But I don't know, man. I just don't want to get COVID. I almost feel like, hey, maybe it might be an eventuality, but
I think
shit.
everybody's gonna get it, to be honest. I mean, I'm double vaxxed. Go vaccines. But if you're not vaccine or anti-vax, as I call it, I'm sympathetic to that argument too. And this is where I get into a lot of trouble with people, because I'm questionable about stuff like getting a third dose or a fourth
Right.
dose, and how long does this vaccine really last for? I mean, if you look at the Israel studies, they're saying maybe 6 to 8 months at max, right? And that doesn't mean that you're going to die after 10 months of getting COVID. That just means that you're might have an increased chance of hospitalization after that 10-month period or however long it is. I question the vaccine. Like, I got the vaccine, no problem getting it. I don't know if I'd get a third shot. I don't know. Well, I'll take that on when that comes my way. But the other thing I question is that when like this was introduced, it was like, this is going to be the savior. You take this and boom, that's it. You're done. And then it turned into, well, we didn't know this. What else is there that we don't know? You know what I mean? Like the vaccine hasn't been even out a year or two. What don't we know that's going to be happening in 5, 10, 15 years? What happens if you're a 20-year-old female and you're having a child right now, but you got the vaccine, and then 15 years from now, and I'm going to be super hyperbolic here, but your child has 2 heads now or something like that, right? So like, we don't know. And since you didn't tell us the truth here on the length of how long this vaccine was going to be, because I thought like 2 doses and I'm good, right? No third dose, no fourth dose. Now we're talking about third, fourth doses. Biden got his shot. Israel is pushing a third dose for at least people 75 and up. So it's
I had heard that the third one is like it's only recommended for like as it was
For
going to
old
be in the
people.
first place. So, yeah, like old people or people with
For sure.
comorbidities,
But
etc.
you're gonna get it. Like there's,
Yeah.
I know there's anecdotal cases of people that have been double shotted that have gotten COVID. But again, going back to Israel and even New Brunswick here in Canada, New Brunswick is like 80% have their population have gotten both doses, and their cases are skyrocketing right now, right? So that tells you that those have gotten both shots are spreading this virus. So I'm gonna get it. I've been double vaxxed. You guys are right. My chance of going to the hospital is not going to be as high as somebody that didn't get double shots.
Right.
Okay.
And I don't want an American hospital bill.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So I'm
you guys
definitely
wanna
getting a
get-
vaccination. I don't want.
If you guys want, I pulled up that clip that you sent me, and I can screen share it and play it.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
Okay, it's only a minute and a half, so I can do that.
All right, let's take a listen. Take a look. This is Don Lemon and Gupta.
Yeah, Don Lemon and Gupta.
Yeah, after his appearance on Joe.
Okay, you guys can see that?
Nope. Oh, there we go. It's loading. All right.
Okay. All right, I will play this.
But he did say something about ivermectin that I think wasn't actually correct about CNN and lying, okay? Ivermectin is a drug that is commonly used as a horse dewormer. So it is not a lie to say that the drug is used as a horse dewormer. I think that's important, and it is not approved for COVID. Correct?
That's right. That's correct. It is not approved for COVID. And you're right. I mean, the FDA even put out a statement saying, basically reminding people, it was a strange sort of message from the FDA, but they said, you're not a horse, you're not a cow, stop taking this stuff, is essentially what they said, referring to ivermectin.
It's been approved for humans, but not necessarily for COVID, right? Yeah.
That's correct. It's been used for a parasitic disease for something it's called river blindness, and it's been very effective for that. But just because it works for one thing doesn't mean it works for something else. And there's still a few ongoing clinical trials around ivermectin, but for the most part, if you look at the data, there's no evidence that it really works here. When Joe got sick, he took ivermectin. He also took monoclonal antibodies, which is, an infusion of these antibodies. So he took both those things. It's very likely it was the monoclonal antibodies that made him feel better so quickly.
Sanjay, always a pleasure. I hope this was in.
What was the exact wording that CNN used regarding the accusation of him taking horse dewormer.
Well, I think they were saying that he's taking horse paste.
Yeah,
I don't
it
think
was,
they.
It was exactly that. It was Joe Rogan takes horse dewormer, and he was saying to Gupta, he was prescribed this by a doctor, right? His doctor was the one that told him to take ivermectin. So here you have a case. This is, and again, doctors are allowed to have two different opinions, obviously, and but I think this is just a case of one doctor says that you are going to prescribe this, and Gupta, who's a doctor, wouldn't prescribe that as a medication, right? So again, like, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because I know on Fox News there's a headline saying that Don Lemon denies CNN lied. But I guess it's. I have to find the exact quote because I know all over the internet, like horse dewormer and Rogan were like a pretty big deal. Like it seems like everybody was saying, "Oh, horse dewormer and Rogan."
It's not just horse dewormer for me, and it's the way they frame it. So, for example, when CNN says Joe Rogan takes horse dewormer drug or veterinary medicine, like this is given in some like Gupta said, it was they won a Nobel. The guy who invented it won a Nobel Prize in 2015 or something like that for it, right? And it was prescribed to cure river blindness. Right, not river blindness in horses, river blindness in humans in India. So they take out what it actually was started off doing. Yes, it probably cures horses too, right? But that's not the way they frame it in the headline. It's a horse drug. Joe Rogan takes it. That's all you take out of that headline. It's not, Joe Rogan takes ivermectin would have been an even better one, right? So that's what Joe had a problem with that. He brought that up in front of it, Gupta, and said, what's it like working for a news organization that lies? And
yeah.
I understand what Gupta did in there and the Don Lemon clip. He's just defending his position at CNN. The problem is you got a doctor that's just defending their position to keep their job. You're not having somebody that's giving you truth. I don't give a fuck if ivermectin works or not. If it does, then let us know, the public, so we can start doing that versus, whatever. There's always been this there's been a bunch of stuff that's come up as like different treatments of vitamin D, for example, and it doesn't really get talked about at all in mainstream media. The big conversation is get vaccinated. That's the only way, which is fine. Like I said, I'm double vaxxed. I just think that there's a lot of fishiness that's going on with COVID. And this 2 weeks. This could be another 4-hour podcast, obviously. But 2 weeks.
Horse dewormer.
Yeah.
Well, like in terms of ivermectin, though, like Gupta was explaining. Well, I think there are two important points there. Like, is CNN was painting Joe Rogan as like this crazy wacko conspiracy theorist who was like going and getting veterinary ivermectin, but he did take the human version, and he was prescribed it by a doctor, and Dr. Sanjay Gupta would not prescribe it, like you said. But also, like, people are defending ivermectin. They always say, usually all they say, it's a Nobel Prize winning drug, but most of the time they don't say that it won a Nobel Prize for curing river blindness. And I think it's also important to point out that river blindness is a completely different type of thing from COVID. And like he was saying, there isn't really, if you look at the data, there isn't really any conclusive scientific evidence to say that ivermectin actually helps with COVID.
Yeah, I think Gupta's right. This is a new virus. We don't know that much about it. So, I mean, if you're in Joe's case and you're a multi-billionaire and you have all these things at your disposal and you get COVID, why not take a chance and throw everything at it that you can? This is the same thing with Trump when he threw everything at it. And people are giving him shit about, what was the other one? Hydroxychloroquine or whatever.
Yeah.
But then again, you had Brendan Schwab that went into his doctor and was asking him, hey, do you want to take this drug? Right. So there's doctors out there prescribing it. It becomes like a negative ivermectin is, easily dismissed right away. When it's, red flag, it's cheaply made, right? So pharmaceutical companies couldn't make their billions off of it. It's easily distributed if they wanted to get it all out there. If it was an effective drug, who knows? But like, to not even question this, or to be like, oh, he's taking horse to worm it, and the belittling of a medicine when we're trying out new things under a pandemic and this virus is new to us. I just see this as, it's all political now. Like 100% of this is political, and none of this is science based. I mean, the science is in the vaccines, right? If you got your 2 shots, you should not fucking give a shit about what anybody else is doing, taking the vaccine or not, right? I'm protected.
I agree. Yeah,
I got my 2 shots. If you didn't get your vaccine, that's a you problem. I don't give a shit what you do, where you go, what concert you go to, with how many people. If you wear a mask indoors, outdoors, if you vaccinate your kid or whatever, I'm protected. The science is out there. As far as I'm concerned, COVID is fucking done for me, right? Like, it's over.
Mm.
It's just political statements on here on out when it comes to all this shit. So, yeah.
I don't think COVID's going to be a big issue a year from now.
No, I mean, I have a feeling, even though I'm double vaxxed and I haven't technically been tested and got it, I feel like I'm going to get it at some point, whether it be some variant that's not of Delta or something else. I have a feeling that all of us are going to get this at some point. You just got to do your best, take the vaccine, stay healthy, eat healthy, try not to, get comorbidities, and I don't know. Yeah,
just get single morbidities, not
hopefully
comorbidities.
this I don't know, did you guys hear about the Merck pill? Hopefully that ends up working too.
Yeah. Of course, that got immediately politicized too.
Though.
Oh, and if it hasn't gotten really politicized, I'm sure it will at one point.
I guess the only problem with the Merck pill is that it's just a treatment, so it's not for prevention. It's for if you get COVID, you take the pill.
But wait, Ted Cruz will take it one day, and then it'll be like, oh, fucking Merck pill, or or AOC will take it, and it'll be like, that stuff doesn't work. It's just like, it's all nonsense.
Yeah, COVID is for some people it's no joke. For others, it's a walk in the park.
Yeah, exactly.
Ice throw, man.
And it's like the more statistics come out about it, the more complex it gets. Like, generally speaking, like it's still the case that if you're older and you have comorbidities, you're more likely to get COVID. And if you're vaccinated and you get COVID, you're more likely to experience side effects from it if you're older and you have comorbidities. But then I remember seeing people talk about studies how like there are some cases in which like children can be more likely to get COVID in some specific cases, and then it depends on whether you're talking about getting COVID or whether you're talking about whether the side effects will be worse if you get COVID, and then people confuse those, and like we were saying, they set up false dichotomies about it. And then everything gets politicized, and then it's hard to know what is true and false.
Yeah, because my county is 81% vaccinated, and it just depends on where you live. Like I a lot of people personally who've caught it here. If you hear about someone getting it, it's like, oh shit, someone actually got it. Oh shit. But I do know a lot of people that have gotten it in other places. It's just where I live, it's not a huge community threat at the moment.
Yeah. No, same here. It's not. It's like we're getting cases, but it's not a huge community threat. Our hospitals aren't being overwhelmed right now. So, yeah. Although, if you paid attention to our Canadian media, you would think that like 14-year-olds were dying. Did you see that one, Andrew, about the 14-year-old dying?
No, I didn't see that.
But it's only been which is like nothing. Isn't that right?
What I missed what you said there. Your audio cut out for a sec.
Isn't like the total of children who died is only 100, which is less than the flu, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken.
I think so.
It's like less than 500 kids when like population of under 18 is like 32 million or some shit like that.
Yeah, so it's
And-
like pretty much a non.
Yeah, and of those 500, you know, I'm sure 100 or 200 of them had a comorbidity or two, right? So
Yeah, or they may have had like childhood cancer or something like that that may have wrecked their immune system.
yeah, and thank God.
Yeah.
I mean, if this was a virus that took over our kids, man, like I was worried a year or March of 2020, right? Like all of us were like, yeah,
Yeah, we
thank God
didn't
it's
know.
not. Yeah. Not to say taking out old people is better, but it's just like, yeah, it could have been worse. It could have been a virus that took out, you know, 8-year-olds or 6-year-olds that are perfectly
Yeah.
healthy, right? So, which like
Yeah, for
measles
sure.
and mumps did or does if you're not vaccinated. So,
Yeah, and measles and mumps can give you like lifetime complications.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Polio, man. Polio.
Oh yeah, but yeah,
Yeah.
And
Well,
then the pregnancy, the fertility drugs that they're given. What was that one drug? Different because it's a drug, but there wasn't a drug that they were giving people for, and then having like deformed kids.
Yeah, there was what there was also one, I forget what it was called, but my grandma took it and it caused her to go deaf.
Oh, like a drug?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
it
I
sounds
forget what
like
it was
Drugs have crazy effects, man.
Might be there was like
Very common.
thalidomide. Is that what it was?
Thalidomide, that's it. Yeah, thalidomide.
Mums took pregnant mums.
Thalidomide was popular for pregnant mothers, and it caused them to have deformed kids and shit like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely concern, you know, hey, take this thing and
Quinine.
Yeah.
boom, you have a kid with like short arms
That's what it was.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
super long.
Did you
I
hear?
don't know how it works, but I understand the distrust. I'll say trust. But also, if you're a gambling man, I look at him too.
Yeah. Well, I guess we probably all have doubts about the way, like, the super pro-vax people, like especially super pro-vax people, like demonizing anti-vax people as if they're like as if the anti-vax people are advocating for mass genocide or some shit like that. Like,
Well, I think
that
it's
shit, like
the
that shit
anti-vax.
is definitely ridiculous. But if you take a risk benefit analysis and you look at all of that and you look at all of these things, all of us, like, we're not I would say it's probably accurate to say that none of us are inherently against anti-vax people, but we all decided to get vaccinated twice still because it's it's much more, there are much more advantages than disadvantages to getting vaccinated.
Well, I'll say this: like, I'm against anti-vax people who spread harmful misinformation. So we're talking about like those people that are like, oh yeah, the microchips, yeah.
Oh,
Bill
yeah,
Gates. Yeah, Bill Gates is putting microchips in all of your coronavirus vaccines. Yeah.
Yeah, bro. See, it
yeah,
stuck to
bro.
my neck.
Earth
Oh
is
shit,
flat.
it fell.
Earth is flat, bro. Like, have you heard of the
Yeah.
NBA player, the controversy that's going on?
yeah.
I heard about that. I didn't hear the details. What exactly went on with that?
Oh, the NBA is making everyone get a vaccine.
Oh, okay.
And I think Kyrie Irving doesn't want to get it, but he's also the flat earther guy.
Oh, is he? Okay.
Yeah, he's also a flat earther. Go
Okay.
figure. You can pretty much guarantee that every single person that's a flat earther is also anti-coronavirus vaccine. I can pretty much
funny.
guarantee that.
Sure.
I know. Has Eddie Bravo been talked to about this vaccine? I want to hear what
That's a
his
good
opinion
question. Joe Rogan should do a podcast with him about it. I wonder what he thinks about it.
Yeah, have Eddie Bravo and like a pro-vax person, and I want to hear what they got to say.
Yeah.
And
That
Alex
would-
Jones.
And that
Yeah.
other guy with the bow tie. But the guy with the bow tie, I don't even know if he'll show up on Rogan anymore. The guy
Yeah,
that
he
did
might-
like the podcast about like tropical diseases, as he came on pre-vaccine, before the vaccine was developed. But that guy is actually a vaccine scientist, so
Right.
he should have him on and talk to him
Yeah.
instead
Man.
of Gupta, the guy that actually is involved in vaccine science. He's the guy that debunked
Yeah.
like the autism, the link between vaccines and autism.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that would be really interesting. Or like him instead of like Alex Berenson, like that guy
How did the Alex Berenson one go? Because I didn't.
it was basically like super anti-COVID vax, I would say.
Okay.
Like a lot of it was stuff we were talking about that is like a really inaccurate view of an understanding of science. Like, bro, people who get the vax can still get COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that simple, bro. That's the whole story.
Yeah, people you get the flu vaccine, still get the flu. It's not new. It's not new. Yeah. Yes, you can still get it.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone says that you won't get it. It's like numbers game, man.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, like a package of condoms doesn't say 100% effectiveness against pregnancy.
You should still use condoms.
I'm not saying not to. I'm just saying, hey, there's a possibility that you could still impregnate somebody with the condom on.
Yeah. Of course.
Even when you use it correctly.
Yeah. Could break or something.
Could break. There might be like a small hole in it somewhere.
Yeah.
You don't know. You might have it on too tight and it seeps through the top or something. It might fall off. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. It can happen.
Nothing's 100% effective. Nothing.
Of course.
No, but it was sold like it was like 98% effective. Like Fauci came out and said it.
Oh yeah, that's based off of the pre-Delta.
Pre-Delta wave. Pre-Delta wave, it was like, wasn't it something like 90 to 95% effective against preventing hospitalization and death?
There's a video that went viral that it goes like, it has all these news. It has every mainstream media news, and it starts off at like 99% effective, and then after like a month, it goes down to 95.
I remember they were saying versus Delta, like that. I think some of them were like 60 versus Delta.
Yeah, it went down with Delta, right?
Yeah, that's right. It kept going down and down and down and down and down. Like it started at 90, and now it's at like 40.
Right. Yeah, because it's a new variant, right? And I mean, the vaccine still protects you more against the Delta than not getting the vaccine. And but then like we were talking about, the third vaccine is controversial because, like, as far as I understand it, most healthcare professionals are not recommending that most people get the third one. They're just saying, like we were saying, like older people with comorbidities, but who knows, like, if there's going to be yet another variant or endless variants, will there have to be endless vaccines? Will they be approved for more people? If that's going to happen, there's going to be more outrage about it. If that happens, like, I'll be more hesitant about taking the third one than the first two, but it depends on the circumstances and what's happening with the new variant. Like, it's complex shit.
Yeah. I don't. Depends, man. Just more data, the better off we are. Like, I understand the like, hey, things change and more data gets, we get more data and then we become more informed. Like what's going on with ivermectin? Hey, they're doing more studies on it. Let's see what happens. Like,
Yeah.
it could change based off of like what the new data that comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember
Yeah.
there were like a bunch of different variants they were like scared of. There was like the South African variant that they were scared of, and then this Brazilian variant, and we haven't heard anything about those variants. It's just
Right.
Delta.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know it's going to be a Gamma or whatever.
Delta, beta, gamma variants.
Yeah. Because the first one was Alpha, right? The one that the vaccines were based off of were Alpha.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, COVID.
Yeah.
Yep.
But things have been pretty normal here. Like
Yeah.
movie theaters here. There's no real lockdown. I don't know what kind of stuff is going on in your neck of the woods.
Yeah, no lockdown. Although we're doing vaccine passports, that's the big one, and like mandatory school vaccinations is another debate that's coming up. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, here's what I heard. I know there's an executive order for federal employees that have to be vaccinated. And right now, the next big thing is a requirement for any company above 100 persons.
Yeah.
That hasn't gone through yet. But if it does, I guess I'm already covered, but I don't know. We'll have to see what happens when this goes through. But I believe if it does go through, you're not forced to vaccinate. You also have the ability to take a weekly test.
Yeah,
Right.
just again a question like, what is this doing? Like, is this stopping the virus for real?
I don't know. I guess.
Yeah.
And like, how do we ignore what's going on in the Scandinavian countries right now? Norway, Denmark, Sweden, that have totally gotten rid of all these restrictions, no passports whatsoever, and is still doing fine, just like us, right? So
I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no clue.
There's so many variables to take into account when you compare different places too, though. Like the population, but if you're comparing different countries on average, how
It really
how
just
likely
depends on how many fat people your country has.
Yeah, how many fat people your country has, and like in terms of your culture, how likely or unlikely people are to listen to like politicians telling them to get vaccinated.
Are Scandinavians pretty fit, or do they have like a lot of fat people over there?
That's
no,
a
they're
good
pretty
question.
fit, but the UK is another example of a country doing well and have gotten rid of a majority of the restrictions, no passports whatsoever, and they're a lot unhealthier than the Scandinavian countries. There's examples that you can use of like,
Well, Scotland is pretty fat, from what I've heard.
yeah.
I think Scotland is one of the fattest countries in Europe, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I just my question, the science, when the science is practiced differently in different locations around the world. I mean, like, I don't know what science they're practicing in Australia, but it seems like they're,
They're super strict though in Australia.
yeah. But like, why? Their death count is super low, and they have super low cases comparatively. So
Maybe that's why, because of how strict they are. It's ridiculous there.
Yeah, but their
it's hard to say.
Yeah, their population is cheering it on though too, so it's strange. So
I don't know. Maybe who knows?
Like in cases like that, you don't know. Like you can totally get confused between correlation and causation too, because like the numbers were low, and then did the strict lockdowns make them even lower, or was it just a coincidence and that would have happened anyway? Like you can look at that one way or the other, and in like all of these cases, we're comparing different countries and different places.
Yeah, apparently Kuwait is fatter than the United States.
Oh, okay.
Do you know who Tom Woods is?
Yeah, he's like
Yeah,
the crazy
yeah.
libertarian guy.
Yeah, he's a crazy.
Anarcho-capitalist libertarian guy, right?
Yeah, he has. Have you done his COVID? He has a COVID test. But anyway, you could test your.
Oh,
knowledge.
does he?
Yeah, you can test your knowledge on how good you are on COVID. But yeah.
Oh, okay.
Anyway,
I know like him and Dave Smith and Michael Malice and those libertarians and like anarcho-capitalist people are super against all the COVID lockdowns and mask mandates and vaccine mandates and shit like that.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's just too many fat people in
Yeah.
in the United States. I'm trying to see what
Canada,
Canada's
too.
like fat rating is.
There's not that many.
Uh,
You
I
guys
think
are
it's-
ranked 26 in fatness.
Okay. I would say
And
we're probably like there are lots of fat people here in Canada too.
America's ranked 12th in fatness.
Oh wow, way more fat people than in Canada, I guess.
Yeah. The fattest is Nauru, 60% obesity.
Okay.
What are the restrictions like?
I don't know. Nauru is probably a small country.
Yeah.
Like most of these in the top 5 are like island nations.
Top
Nauru,
5 fattest?
Yeah, Nauru, Cook Islands, Palau, Marshall Islands, Tuvalu. It sounds like a place with a lot of Polynesian people. The Polynesian people are big. Samoa. Yeah, most of the fat places are Polynesian.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. And then once you get past all of the Polynesian places, you get Kuwait, the United States, like in a bunch of Middle Eastern countries, I guess are fat, pretty fat. So we're talking about Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Libya, Turkey, Egypt, Lebanon, and then the UAE, Bahamas, and then you get New Zealand at 22, but there's a lot of what you call them in New Zealand. What are those Polynesians?
I'm not sure.
There are a lot of Polynesians in New Zealand. That's probably where that number is coming from.
Oh, okay.
And then you got Iraq, Fiji, another Polynesian nation, Bahrain, which is a Middle Eastern country, and then Canada at 26. And right behind you guys is Australia. So you and Australia have similar fat numbers there.
Interesting.
And the skinniest nations are probably the poorest, if most likely. Like on the bottom of the list, you got Vietnam and India's down there. Cambodia, Nepal, Japan. Yeah, lots of skinny people in Japan. Ethiopia, Korea. Well, not all of the nations are poor. Like Japan is not a poor country, and they're near the bottom of the list.
Yeah, like it could be like poor countries and starvation. It could be that, or it could be like people choosing to eat more healthily.
And diet too. I mean, like the Japanese
Yeah.
are obviously eating like sushi and fish and rice, right? Where
Yeah.
It depends.
Yeah.
Like there's crap in Japan too.
Oh yeah, there's McDonald's.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's culturally like if you're fat in Japan, probably even your parents get pissed off.
Yeah, but that seems to be like an Asian culture thing. I remember my parents telling me when they visited China, this was decades ago, but they were talking about how much at least back then, like I said, this was a long time ago, but there were less fat people, but it was also like people were more judgmental about it.
Well, those people eat freaking scorpions and shit. Like, I couldn't imagine someone getting fat off of fucking scorpions and whatever weird
And
shit
bats.
they eat over there. And bats.
Yeah, scorpions.
Bats.
Yeah, like man, like even watching them eat the scorpions, they don't even look like they enjoy it.
I've never seen someone eat a scorpion. Maybe on Fear Factor a long time ago. I don't know.
Well, I would highly recommend watching a show called Idiot Abroad.
Oh, okay.
It's about this guy from the UK who travels to countries that typically have cuisine that is not the best, well, to Western standards.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, basically he goes abroad and he just complains about shit the whole time. But it's funny. It's hilarious though.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds funny.
Um, it's a spin-off of a podcast.
Oh, okay.
And it's who is that guy? That English comedian, Ricky Gervais. Like he's the
Oh, okay.
producer. He produces it and he sends this guy named Carl all over the world to experience, to take him out of his comfort zone. And
Oh,
he
okay.
gets like really irritated about how other cultures do things. Like he's the type of the guy that he doesn't censor himself. So right to the people's faces, he'll like say some pretty offensive things because he just doesn't know better, you know.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds funny. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we've been talking for a while now, so we've pretty much encompassed critical race theory and systemic racism and COVID and vaccine mandates and tribalism and freedom of speech and individual freedom and all of these involved interconnected issues. So yeah, I think we could end it here for tonight. And so thanks for talking, guys. This was interesting as always, and hope you guys watching this liked it too. And yeah, so I think tomorrow the plan is to talk about season 5 of Castlevania on your channel, Woke Centrist, right, Dusty?
Yeah, I have one more episode. I should be able to do that
Okay.
tomorrow before we start. I don't know how much you got.
I've still got 3 episodes, I think, but I should be able to watch those before tomorrow.
Cool, man.
Yeah.
We'll talk.
So yeah,
about
check that out tomorrow on Dusty's channel. We'll be talking about season 5 of Castlevania. And yeah, thanks everyone for watching. Click the subscribe button, click the like button, share it everywhere, click the bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. Got a few things going on next week. Next week, I'm actually going to be doing a debate with our friend Parker about socialism because he really doesn't like it. And he said something hyperbolic about it on Instagram that I wanted to talk to him about and I was going to respond. But then I thought we should turn this into a podcast because he said something like socialism causes extinction. So I'm like, wow, that sounds ridiculous. But but I trust his judgment. So that we'll have like a debate / conversation about this. So that should be happening on Thursday of next week. And on Friday on Read Nice Wonders channel called Cordial Curiosity, both Dusty and I will be talking to him about critical race theory because we watched his video on his channel, which was an interview with James Lindsay and them reacting to critical race theorists. And we both thought that James Lindsay, as always, got a whole bunch of shit wrong in there. So we're going to talk to him about that next Friday. And I'm actually going to be doing another chat about critical race theory sometime soon with the popular socialist philosopher Ben Burgess sometime soon too. Probably next week, if not within the next couple of weeks, about critical race theory. So that would be
You're
fun.
gonna talk to Ben Burgess?
Yeah. So that would be
let me know,
cool.
man. Let me know.
Yeah, I will. It's tentatively going to be next Wednesday, but we'll see for sure. So yeah, check for that next Wednesday, or I'll schedule it for whenever it's going to happen. Other than that, And yeah, like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And investigate the boogeyman, the dangerous critical race theory and critical theory and postmodernism and Marxism and all this stuff. But also, like, try not to demonize people who disagree with you, like demonize anti-vaxxers and shit like that too. And yeah, so check out those upcoming chats too. And anything else you guys want to say before we end it there?
Sure. I'll just say any ideology taken to an extreme is going to have ill effects no matter what it is.
For sure.
And also ask if Parker enjoys his 40-hour work weeks.
yeah, that'll be fun to talk about. Yeah. All right. What about you, Chris?
Let's go, Brandon.
Yeah, I saw that in the I saw that in the comments here. That's a basketball player who doesn't want to get vaxxed, right?
No, you didn't see that story?
No, who is that?
Okay, did you get that meme, Dusty?
No, I don't know about it.
Okay, so there's a NASCAR driver that won a race. You can watch this online. I'll send you the clip of it too. But anyway, the NASCAR driver won a race. His name was Brandon. He came number 1. And as you know, like NASCAR fans are, there's a lot of Trump people in the NASCAR community. So in the crowd, there was like 50,000 people in the stands at this NASCAR race. They were shouting, "Fuck you, Biden," right? Like at the top of their lungs. And this is on like NBC or Fox News, or like a major media organization. And the announcer said, "Oh, you can hear them talking about you in the stands, Brandon. They're saying, 'Let's go, Brandon,'" right? Trying to cover up the "fuck you, Biden" coming from the stands, right? And then that became like it became a meme on the internet. Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That is funny. I'll send you the clip.
Okay. Yeah, that's hilarious. All right. Well, yeah, thanks again for talking, guys. And thanks again, everyone, for watching. And have a good night. And adios until next time.
Alrighty.